is Rachel Hatfield with Mental Health Professionals Continuing Education, and I'm here with Melinda Taylor, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of these intensive services that she's offering through. She's a licensed professional counselor and supervisor in the state of Arkansas, and I believe her practice is in Russellville. Is that correct?
Okay.
Yeah. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her and let her introduce herself.
So, hello.
Hey.
Yes, my name is Melinda Taylor, and I am a therapist in Russellville. I have a private practice in an old historic home right off of Main Street here, and it's a neat little place. And that's where I provide my services and serve people. And so I know you wanted me to talk today about my intensives, and I wanted to too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just start with what intensives are. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead and just tell us a little bit about what an intensive is.
Okay. So a therapy intensive, first of all, most people, when they think of intensive, they think of marriage intensives because those have been going on for years. And so that's what most people do is they go somewhere and they do 2 or 3 days of marriage work. And that's what most intensives are. I do some marriage work, but truly my intensives are more individual based. And all it is, it's not, there's no smoke and mirrors or anything. All it is really just jam-packed therapy. And my intensives are 7 hours. So 7 hours in a day, which is pretty intense, hence the name, right? But you have a 1 hour, 1 to 1.5 hour lunch break when I do intensives. And it is basically a model of therapy where instead of doing a lot of the slow paced, you jump right in.
So when you say it's 7 hours long, so this is one therapy session per day, basically, that you're meeting with someone for the entire day.
That is correct. So the way that my therapy intensives work, so if someone wanted to get one, they would actually call my office and schedule a phone screening for me. And I would just interview them and see if I'm an appropriate source for them. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I'm not for everybody. And so I would see if I would think I would be beneficial to help them. That's with the screening, they call, and I interview them. And then I send some well, not really documents, a couple little worksheets and some assignments for clients to do prior to starting intensive. It gives me some background information. And if they are involved with a therapist, I require them to have permission from their therapist, and their therapist agree that they do it. And it's even better if I could have a little bit of communication. I'm a therapist, so I know we're busy, so it's not always perfectly available time wise, but if I can get a little bit, yes, this is where they're stuck and this is what I need you to help me with, then that benefits it a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
So then that's kind of how the screening process starts. And then they would come at approximately 9 in the morning, and I would start with looking over their information, and I usually give them a couple little activities to do while I'm looking over their information. So they're engaged in something, and then I'm looking over to see how I want to start. So the morning is mostly assessing what the root is of the issue. So let's say somebody comes and they have an issue with anxiety. They're having panic attacks, they're having constant anxiety, they really don't even know why. And they've had all kinds of, a lot of times the people who come to me have had therapy, sometimes even 3 or 4 different therapists, but just haven't been able to get to the root of the issue. So they would, I would assess what is the thing they want treated. Now, I'm going to move back and forth into this, so I may not be as communicative as I should be, but this is just how I am. So they would have to focus on one issue per day. Okay, so that's one of the first things I say. You're not going to come for 1 day or 2 or 3 days and clean up everything in your life if you have had trauma since you were, 2. That's not what that does. Okay, we'd have to have multiple intensives. Okay, but you have some anxiety of some panic attacks, you're not functioning. You're not doing well at all, and you need relief now. You can't wait for 6 months of individual therapy to do something with it. So you come in and you present the problem, you have anxiety. And so I would be, first of all, assessing what are your coping skills and your strengths. Let Can I go in automatically and start processing it? I would have done that in the phone call, but especially when you go face to face. And so if you don't have that, I would resource them. So with EMDR, we always use a calm place and a container. So I probably would, because I use a lot of MDR, I would probably put a container or anyway, I would use some interventions to provide some resources with them, and assess what the issue is. And then I might do a little, depending on how they're doing, I might do a little processing. So that would be in the morning. They'd have a
Mhm.
break. And the afternoon, I really dig in. Um, I would start with what I believe is the main root cause. And there's therapeutic interventions. You go
Yeah.
back and find out the root cause. And then I would process those issues with either, and I would use ego state work. I use EMDR. I use some somatic, um, not exactly the model somatic experiences, but I use some somatic exercises, and I use hypnotherapy, just depending on what I need to go after what the root is. And I
Mhm.
work on that. And then I work, if I have time, then I work also on the future. How would those things be impacting for the future? So they get therapy for 7 stinking hours.
So it's a pretty intensive thing. I mean, it definitely means exactly what it sounds like, intensive therapy. And so some of the practices or the models that you just mentioned that you use, you said EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and it is amazing treatment for PTSD and anxiety. And I know it's 8 to 10 sessions usually, but if you are doing an intensive, you can definitely put that into if you have a clear picture of that. Yeah. And so what were the other ones that you mentioned that you use in this practice?
I also do some clinical hypnotherapy. I did I did a advanced training and 2-year internship learning how to do hypnotherapy for all kinds of traumatic kind of things like abuse. And so I will use that. Sometimes I'll use that if the client is not able to get to the root with traditional models. I will put them in a trance, and we'll go backwards to see if we can find where the real root of it is. Because the basis of real healing for an intensive for me is that you don't learn coping skills, you don't learn how to survive it. You actually go to the root and you heal the reason that they had the issue in the first place.
So it is a true healing. It's not just a maintenance or management technique. It's something that you're working on trying to help them heal through that entire process so that they're not going to have that issue and be able to function. Because you said if they're not functioning at that time, this would actually help them to get to a point where they are functioning.
Sometimes there's some psychoeducation in there as well, helping them understand what their body is doing and how that somatically it's reacting, and normalizing a lot of the things they think. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if someone is new to therapy and they are just trying to figure all of this out, would intensives be a option for them?
Are you saying like as a therapist, or are you saying as a client?
As a client, if someone's never experienced therapy before, would this be a good fit for them, or would this be a better fit for someone who has tried therapy for a while and is a little stuck in things, or both?
So I think it could be either one. It could be good for someone like that as long as they are pretty stable. So maybe they've had a pretty good childhood, or they've had just some minor issues in their childhood. This is not a substitute for therapy. I do not become their regular therapist. So if they need regular support, they need to have a regular therapist. So for someone is stuck in therapy and they need some help, or several of my clients have actually been therapists that are in different parts of the state, that they know everybody. They don't want to see somebody locally, or they don't have time, or I have a lot of medical professionals or somebody that have high pressure jobs. They
Mhm.
can't commit to a weekly appointment. So they come in blocks. So they'll come and do a therapy day or a day and a half, and then they'll wait 3 or 4, 5, 6 months and come back and do another one. And they just do their work that way. It's more convenient for them and they get a quicker result.
Yeah. And so it is helpful if someone has a very busy schedule and can't commit to a weekly session but needs some pretty intensive work, because if you're doing intensive therapy in traditional therapy, you're doing an hour once or twice a week to meet their needs at that time. So what you're saying is this allows for something different.
Right. And I've done traditional therapy for over 20 years, and I'm not knocking that at all. I still do some of that on 2 days a week. But what I found is you spend about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes checking in with them. And then if you're dealing with some traumatic stuff, you have to put them back together for the last 10 to 15 for them to be able to drive back to work or continue their life. So this little slice in the middle is all you're getting to do, and it's taking a long time. Where with an intensive model, if you start processing the trauma, you can stay with it until it's clear. You don't
Yeah.
have to break it up in chunks, and then they're not discombobulated for weeks until they finally finish processing this kind of trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had so many people tell me things like, I have to schedule my therapy at a certain time of day because I can't do anything after that. And so they feel they've unpacked all of this stuff and they have to continue to be put together and go back to work or continue their day and have be successful as a parent after this and go home and cook dinner and play with their kids whenever they've just kind of broke everything down in therapy. And so I always tell people it is so important to give yourself grace and be kind to yourself in between sessions and try to be gentle with yourself and understand that you're doing a lot of work sometimes whenever you don't even recognize that you're doing a lot of work in that hour. But in an intensive, it sounds like you're doing a lot of work and you know it.
Yes, actually, people are prepared. I tell them when they come to wear something really comfortable. If they have any comfort items, I use essential oils. I have blankets and tactile things for them to have. I actually use rice bags that are in the freezer to keep them from going into sympathetic shock with so much. There's a lot of things I do to keep them in that window of tolerance so they can process. And then we take breaks. Sometimes I have a beautiful prayer garden out back. It's a big privacy fence. And sometimes they'll just go walk around out there. So I titrate it going in and out of therapy so they can be able to get the most benefit of it. But yeah, it is intense, and a lot of my clients do plan to stay in a hotel or go stay with a friend in a spare bedroom and not go back to real life that night, especially if they're doing two in a row. Or they may go do that and then join their family the next day.
Yeah. So they take this time as kind of a a personal growth time for them to work only on them, but also using that time afterwards as an opportunity to rest and heal from all the work that they've done.
And so a lot of times the healing, just like with any other processing session, the healing continues. And even if they have had major healing, like I've had clients that tell me, I've been suspicious when they've said it, but that they've had life changing results where things are not the same anymore and they just move forward in this wonderful way after like a day and a half. But there's a new normal they have to adjust to.
Mhm.
And their
Yeah.
family has to adjust to them too with that new normal. So that's why sometimes it is really beneficial if you're already in therapy that you can continue to process that. Or I have them do some journaling, and then sometimes I do a 1 to 2 hour follow up with my clients approximately 2 weeks after an intensive and just see how they're doing and offer some support, a tweak. And there are some that want to come back every so often.
Just do like check-ins.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, tell me a little bit about your practice and how you wound up there.
So I started my practice actually as a call from God. I was in private. I was in working in a local mental health center, and I started feeling really that it was important that people of faith have a place that we can go, that we feel comfortable to go, that they're going to be respectful to our faith. And a lot of times, people feel like if they say God spoke to me, that someone's going to think they have schizophrenic schizophrenia, or they're going to pathologicize their belief system.
Mhm.
So it's, or they're going to, of course, we don't do this. We can't put our moral values on clients or our values in general, but a lot of them are afraid that that's what's going to happen and they're going to be put in that box. So
Mhm.
a lot of people of faith will not actually go to therapy. And surprisingly, a lot of their pastors would encourage them not to, and list it almost as a its own religion itself. So it was really important for me that people of faith have a good clinical professional, not just a pastor, not that that's not wonderful, but not just a pastor to go to if they have issues. So
Mhm.
I opened this practice, a small little, rented a building, and now I'm actually in a little cute little historical house, and there are four of us here now that are providing therapy. And it's, everybody here is a person of deep faith. We, if client wants, we integrate prayer or spiritual, when we use CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, when we use things to change their thought processes, we may use scripture, but it's done in a really client friendly, ethical way based on their spiritual belief system, not on ours. But it's a safe place for them to go and get healing with, from somebody who's professionally skilled,
Mhm.
but is going to respect their faith.
Yeah. I think that's so important. What you said about not
Mhm.
that having a pastor on their team is a bad thing, because I am a big advocate of staying in our lane. And as therapists, we're not pastors, and so I always recommend that someone incorporates someone that they believe has the same spiritual beliefs and faith as them in their personal growth journey. And spiritual dilemmas, I try to recommend and make sure that they know finding someone like a pastor is important.
I think I'm a little bit in the middle of that, in the sense that I do not talk doctrinal issues or that kind of thing with them, but I will talk scripture with them, and we will talk about how God incorporates in their life a lot more than a traditional. I mean, when you're taught in grad school, it's don't touch that, it's unethical, and it's really, you're really taught to fear any kind of uh, tiptoeing into that. And I jump in a very ethical, respectful way with my client, because I think it's one of the major strengths that most of my clients who seek me out are of faith. So it's one
Mhm.
of their strengths, and to not use that would
Mhm.
be, but you're right. I always refer back. I said, I've not been to seminary. So if you want to get into deep theological study, or
Yeah.
if it's a doctoral issue, you really need to speak with your pastor that that's not what I'm here for.
Right. And I agree. I think that incorporating their beliefs and incorporating spirituality and scripture and things like that is definitely necessary with somebody that that's their values and everything. I think that having a therapist that can do that with you is helpful, because we can't separate. And I always tell people mental health is physical health. You can't really separate the two either. That's why I do a lot of somatic work.
Yeah.
Um, but I also advocate for them to have a primary care physician. And so it's kind of the same. It's like I advocate for them to have a primary care physician, a psychiatrist, a therapist, a spiritual leader, because I think that all of those people can bring something to the picture that one of us might be lacking. And so having a holistic approach to that is really important. Also, the fact that just because we all have a faith belief doesn't always mean that we have the same faith belief. And so there's so many denominations and different things like that, and different religions. And so it's important that that they have someone that is strong in their specific beliefs, because that will help guide them on their journey of what they truly feel is foundational to their journey. So yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's awesome that you have four people in this clinic that people have options to go to that will help incorporate that into their journey.
Yes. My
Yeah.
Actually, my husband is a therapist. He retired after 21 years in the Army, went back to school, and so he is a therapist. So he works with more of men issues and first responders, military, police, those kinds of. He works with everybody, but that kind of type of person.
Yeah.
I,
Okay. He does a lot of does he do intensives as well, or does he?
Not currently. Currently, I'm the only one brave enough to do intensives. It does take a lot of skill to, in a very brief period of time, assess what's really going on, what the real true issue is, go into the root, and to comfortably, you know, address it very quickly. And most people are not comfortable with that kind of, uh, I don't know what I would say, but maybe bravery or stupidity. I don't know. But most people are not comfortable with that kind of responsibility to do that. And not everybody's wired to set with somebody's paying for 7 hours straight. That's You switch it with clients. You do one, then you move, and you have a lot of different things that go through the day. So staying with one person's pain throughout the day is not for everybody, but I found it is amazingly effective for the clients. They get something that would take me 6 to 9 months to do. I can do it one day.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that that's something to touch on too is it takes a toll on you as a therapist to be able to do that as well, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. But it's also a calling that you feel that you're equipped. The one of the things that that's important to touch on too is maybe how therapists might be able to utilize this service because of the fact that you kind of touched on this earlier that this isn't a replacement for therapy, but it sounds like something that we might be able to use for our current clients in a way. So can you touch on some of that?
Sure. So if any therapist out there has a client where they feel like they're just stuck, or maybe they've gotten them before I learned a lot of the skills that I have now, I would get them so far and then I just couldn't get them any farther and I didn't know what to do. So if you get like that with a particular client and you feel like they'd be appropriate for an intensive, um, I would have the client call. They can call and I can assess if I think I am, that would be appropriate. But you also could contact me and give a referral. And so the best way to do that would be for you to kind of give me just, you could send it via email. I have a secure email. You could send it via email and just tell me what's going on. And hey, this is my client. Would this be appropriate for you? Or we could have a short phone call and then we could discuss whether I would be or not. um, my particular healed traumas and my trainings and my life experience, I kind of have a superpower with certain clients, but not all clients. So I don't want to waste anybody's time or money. So I would be happy to say whether I think I would be beneficial for the client. So just if a therapist could shoot me an email and let me know, or they could call the office and I can call them back and we could discuss if it would be appropriate for them to refer their client. And then generally what I would do is then afterwards, I would send some kind of treatment summary to the therapist and they could take it from there.
Okay. So they could refer someone and then you would refer their client back for continued therapy if the person felt that that's what they needed after they were done with their intensive with you.
If yes, if it was something where there's an ongoing relationship, the client needs ongoing support, but just maybe the therapist isn't trained in some of the more trauma focused models, or maybe they're not as experienced and they're not having the results they want to have. They could refer them for that, and it could be an adjunct, or it could be a referral, as in they have great coping skills. They've learned, they're therapy wise, but we just have a few things that need to be stuck. So they refer them, I do them, and they may not need any continuing therapy. Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned about you didn't want to waste people's money and time. Let's talk a little bit about cost of this. You don't have to mention exact costs, but let's talk about what does this insurance pay for this or?
So unfortunately, insurance does not pay for this at this time. There are some people across the United States that are doing some really great research that are showing how efficacious this is, and I believe eventually will, because it saves a lot of time, actually money over because it's condensed. But currently now, no, insurance does not pay. It is a cash pay service, and but I have yet to have anybody say so far. I've yet to have anybody say that they were sad about spending the money. And actually, one client called me back and told me her husband, he was really upset and was concerned about the money at the start. And he said he would have paid 3 times as much if he'd known that he could have that much difference in his wife. It would have been worth it for him.
Such
So,
an investment of time and money for yourself, right?
yes. Yeah. There's over 20 years and hundreds of hours of training, lots of experience, not to mention my licensure that goes in to providing this service for people. But also, if you look at even what a co-pays would be at 30, 40, $50 over 6 months, and time off of work
Hmm.
and
Right.
gas getting to and from,
Hmm.
it's usually actually cheaper to do an intensive on the long run than it is to do traditional therapy.
Right. Because there is that time commitment and loss of work time, and there's lots of things that go into it. So it sounds like it's a great component to have um, added to traditional therapy. It also sounds like it can be used in not necessarily in replacement of, but if someone feels that this is a better fit for them, right? And so I mean, it sounds like a great option for that. Um, I know that I did a video with someone recently talking about finding resources of mental health. And right now, it's even there's even a greater need for us to be able to increase knowledge of mental wellness and health across the internet, because that's where people are making their connections. So I think it's really important that we share as much information that we can. And so what I'm going to do is make sure that I have all of your information linked in the comments or in the descriptions below. And then I'm also going to make sure that I tag some of the resources that we have available that are a little bit uh, newer, for options for people to be able to find therapy at decreased rates. And also, I think there are even some pro bono things. So if this isn't an option for them at this time and they really need some therapy right now, there are some great resources that have popped up across the internet that are offering telehealth and some pro bono work. Are you familiar with any of those resources that I maybe am not? Do you have any options that you've used?
Well, generally, we have an intern. And so during this COVID season, we're not taking any new clients for an intern, but generally we have an intern. She does see a few people and she does get supervised by multiple people here. And she is only $25. So when we have an intern, only $25 an hour. So it's very, very economical. And if
Yeah,
we have someone that wants to apply for it to be free, we have. And I mean, all the therapists here do have a couple pro bono clients at a time, but generally, just financially, we can only have a couple at a time.
right.
So all of us do that. And I think most therapists just always have a couple pro bonos. You might have to get on a list a while to get that opening, right? But
Yes.
um, but I do think that during this time, I forget what it's called, but there's a task force that is working to provide a list of therapists who will for COVID providers, like the medical providers, that they are going to do pro bono sessions for them.
Yeah, and I'll definitely list a lot of those connections in the details below. There's several websites that are listing kind of like a directory of therapists, and there are actually a couple websites that are offering telehealth options that therapists are contracting with to offer a little bit of free services. And usually it's brief therapy, like 2 or 3 sessions, but it's a great resource to help people with the support that they need to get through this time, so that whenever things get back to a little bit more stable routine, they can actually reach out and start their therapy journey if that's something they're open to.
Well, and I know if they're military, so they've had military service, there's camps like Warrior Camp and Boot Camp, and I volunteered for those. And they are just a week camp where they get multiple therapy modalities throughout the entire day for 7 days. And it
Wow.
is completely free. So if they're military, they could look up Warrior Camp or I can't think of the other one. I can get it to you. But those are other some resources where they can go and get intensive therapy in a week format at no cost.
Okay, wow. I wasn't aware of that. So definitely send me those links. I'll post those in the descriptions too. So it's called Warrior Camp.
Warrior Camp is one, and that's out of New York. And I can't think what Reboot. Reboot is all over the United States. It moves based on where they're doing it. we were actually scheduled, I was actually scheduled to volunteer in one in March that was going to be in Louisiana, but it got canceled because of the, you know,
Okay.
the
So you've
pandemic.
been doing intensives for a while.
Yes, I have. I started my first intensive that I did volunteered for with this was in 2014. And then I've done them in and out of my office for somebody that's really unstable. And I've worked, I was doing 5 hours, but I just felt like that's not enough to totally clean up an issue and added it to 7.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on your day off and sharing your information with me. I hope that some people will benefit from learning about this information and finding some resources.
Okay, well, thank you for having me.
Guys, thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, and if you have any topics that you would like to see discussed by other therapists, please feel free to leave those in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video and hit that notification bell so that you'll be the first to know when we have new content. Thanks for watching.